the last 7 or so years, MacBooks have had a reputation for being absurdly expensive even on the used market, and especially compared to the competition. But upon the release of Apple Silicon Macs in 2020, that could be further from the case. You can now find older MacBook Pros that originally cost over $1,500 for the price of a new Chromebook. My MacBook Pro is a late 2013 model, which I got just for $180. However, cheap doesn't necessarily mean good value, so what can this 9-year-old MacBook Pro do in 2022? Inside of this machine is a 2.4 GHz Core i5 Haswell processor combined with 8 GB of RAM and Intel Iris integrated graphics. This was pretty standard in the middle of the road, especially compared to the regular MacBook or the MacBook Air. 15-inch models could get dedicated graphics and up to 16 GB of RAM, but the only upgrade you can get here was a slightly faster Core i5, so I consider this pretty top of the line for a 13-inch notebook. The standout feature on this generation of notebooks was the retina display, which gets reasonably bright, has a high pixel density, and is very color accurate. The only real downside is that the screen seems to be made out of the glossiest material known to mankind, and it doesn't really get bright enough for proper outdoor use. Although, to be clear, this is a laptop that likes to be on a desk. I think it looks prettiest there. And besides, the aluminum unibody housing is so beautiful that you wouldn't possibly want to scratch it up. And I'd say that a plastic case is basically mandatory for traveling. But this also really isn't like some downside of or anything, because it really just shows how well put together this MacBook is. The fact that everything fits so perfectly that you wouldn't want to possibly mess it up. I mean, everything just kind of fits together. The hinge is one that opens with one finger very easily. I mean, it wasn't even a few years ago when you'd buy a $150 laptop and it would show its price right to your face with flimsy build quality and plastic materials. Also, while Windows laptops have done a lot of catching up over the years, the trackpad on this thing is still best in its class. It's exceptional for a 13-inch notebook in my opinion. It's big, smooth, and clicks very nicely. The keyboard is also one of the best I've ever typed on. The key travel is deep and solid, which isn't something that any MacBook from like 2016 to 2019 could say. Butterfly keyboard, we do not miss you. But the aesthetics of this machine are so good and it's so pretty, but I think it just makes it all the more disappointing when then you actually try to use it. Let me explain. You see, this laptop is slow, like unusually slow even for a machine of its age. Things like going around the UI are usually smooth as you expect macOS to be, but it does stutter and hitch sometimes, which you'll notice every single time it happens. And things like web browsing and 4K YouTube playback do usually work, but it just takes longer to do, not as snappy as you see on a newer machine. And it clearly doesn't help that websites have generally gotten heavier over time and tasks more demanding on computers. But I think we might have a tint to this poor performance from some benchmarks. I mean, a multi-core score of 1429 in Geekbench and a measly 264 in Cinebench, that's on par with today's low-end Pentium CPUs. That's barely faster than an iPhone 7. And I'm not even sure this is the whole story, because I remember my old Core i5 6200U laptop has similar performance to this machine and was a lot snappier on Windows. And some people might say this is because I'm running Big Sur, the latest support of the OS on this MacBook. But I also tried Catalina and it was no faster in practice. And while High Sierra was better, there isn't enough fast support there to really do good testing, and it's not something I recommend running on this machine anyways. But real world performance aside, what does this laptop have going for it in terms of productivity and usability? Well, let's find out. If you're anything like me, then you're probably considering a MacBook Pro for your college classes. However, there are a few things you should definitely consider before you choose one. First of all, check the battery health. Seriously, these are 9-year-old laptops with 9-year-old batteries inside of them. There's a good chance they won't hold the same charge they did before. I highly recommend replacing these even if it does state that it's good, as even a couple hundred cycles could take at least 10% off the battery. Also, unless you're doing only the most basic of basic tasks on this thing, they should probably definitely get a model with 8 GB of RAM. Don't settle for 4, seriously. It's 2022, and 8 GB of RAM is the absolute minimum. Thirdly, while a lot of people desire MacBooks for their design and aesthetics, macOS isn't exactly for everyone. I highly recommend trying macOS out on another computer before you make the big leap. And you can install Windows on these things, but it is kind of a hassle process, and most of these do in fact run macOS as you'd expect. Also, literally just do some shopping around if you can. Like, this isn't exactly the absolute best deal on a MacBook you can get these days. You can find 2015 models for a similar price if you do some really good eBay bargaining. But in my opinion, the thing that makes this a great college laptop is just that it's incredibly convenient. I mean, seriously, this is much thinner and lighter than the previous Pros were. And yes, while MacBook Air is a decent option if you want something even thinner, they typically have lower performance for not a whole lot of gain. And I say that the 13-inch model is the best option for the most people. Because while some people do like a 15-inch laptop, the truth is that a 13-inch just fits better on a desk, it's lighter, more convenient, and it offers basically the same performance in a smaller package. And what I find sort of crazy is that I still see these types of laptops all around campus, these late 2012 to 2015 or so models, and it makes it kind of surprising that it's such a good bargain too. And I was going to make some point about this being a good price-performance ratio, but the truth is it's 2022 coming on 2023 and it just really isn't anymore. You can find older gaming laptops from around 2015 to 2016 that outperform this thing by a mile. You can find older laptops that are upgradable and upgrade them for the price of this thing. There's so many options in the PC world. But the truth is that nothing really beats a Mac. And considering how reliable these machines became after they solved the whole GPU desoldering itself from the motherboard problem, this really isn't a bad buy in 2022. So before I close off this video, I wanted to quickly test some gaming benchmarks to see just exactly what the Intel Iris graphics can do in this MacBook Pro. And here were the results. Tangent, but I tried my best to actually edit the intros to this video on the MacBook Pro itself, but it became so slow, even at 1/4 quality, that I couldn't tell what was going on, and it made it basically impossible to actually do this edit. So yeah, as you can see, that was not too great. Although considering that this is a MacBook and not something that's gaming dedicated and doesn't even have a dedicated GPU, it's not that surprising. Although it did do reasonably well in lighter titles and could do some light AAA gaming, for example. But with that, this has been the late 2013 MacBook Pro 13-inch, a pretty capable and also affordable college laptop. And this is Calc G, out.